The Boy Who Whispered Peace, a rescue that changed everything. If there wasn't a camera, we wouldn't believe what this toddler did to the puppy. The 3-year-old pressed his forehead against the trembling dog in the garage, surrounded by sharp tools and danger. When his father reviewed the security footage hours later, he couldn't speak through his tears. For 2 weeks, the Mitchell family had watched their new rescue puppy, Teddy, cower in terror, refusing every comfort they offered. Then, one afternoon, their son Liam disappeared outside, despite their desperate warnings to stay away from the frightened animal. What the home security camera captured was so profound, so unexpected, it would change their understanding of love, healing, and the remarkable wisdom hidden in the smallest hearts. Before we continue, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another story that reminds us what truly matters in life. The nights had become unbearable. Sarah Mitchell pressed her palms against her hollow, burning eyes, counting the sleepless hours. 14 days. 2 full weeks since they'd driven to the county shelter and brought home the fluffy golden puppy with the soulful brown eyes. The shelter volunteers had promised them that Teddy just needed time, patience, and love. They'd warned about his background, found abandoned in a basement, half-starved, traumatized, but assured them that with the right family, he would blossom. Instead, he was withering before their eyes. "He won't eat again," Mark said from the kitchen doorway, his voice flat with exhaustion and defeat. The untouched bowl of premium puppy food sat in the corner where Teddy had wedged himself behind the living room couch, as far from human contact as possible. That's 2 meals today he's refused.
I know. Sarah's hands trembled as she poured her 4th cup of coffee. The caffeine no longer worked. It just made her heart race with anxiety. The shelter said he'd adjust. They promised us. It's been 2 weeks, Sarah. Mark's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his stubbled skin. He looked like he'd aged years in mere days. He's terrified of everything. Us, Liam, his own shadow. This isn't working. In the living room, their 3-year-old son sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding a bright yellow squeaky toy hopefully toward the dark corner. Liam's small face was scrunched in concentration, his tongue making soft clicking sounds he'd learned from a YouTube video about calming dogs. "Come on, Teddy," Liam whispered, his voice tender and patient beyond his years. "It's fun. Look." He squeaked the toy gently, trying to entice the puppy out of his hiding place. From the shadows, 2 frightened brown eyes peered out. Teddy's entire body trembled violently, his tail tucked so tightly beneath him it was invisible. His ears lay flat against his head, and his breathing came in rapid, panicked gasps. "Liam, honey," Liam whispered, his voice tender and patient beyond his years. "It's fun. Look." He squeaked the toy gently, trying to entice the puppy out of his hiding place. From the shadows, 2 frightened brown eyes peered out. Teddy's entire body trembled violently, his tail tucked so tightly beneath him it was invisible. His ears lay flat against his head, and his breathing came in rapid, panicked gasps. "Liam, honey, leave him alone," Sarah called out, her voice sharper than she intended. The sleeplessness had eaten through her patience like acid. The vet said to give him space. "But he's sad, Mommy." Liam's lower lip jutted out, his small face crumpling with empathy. "I just want to help him feel better." "You're making it worse," Sarah snapped before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air like poison. She watched her son's face crumble, saw the hurt bloom in his eyes, and immediately regretted her harshness. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's very tired." Mark sank onto the couch, his head dropping into his hands in a posture of complete defeat. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken failure. "Maybe we should call the shelter," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them it's not working out, that we're not equipped for this." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. "You want to give up? After everything we promised?" "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." Mark stood, frustration bleeding into anger as his voice rose. "Look at him, Sarah. Really look. He's miserable. We're miserable. Liam is miserable. Maybe Teddy needs a different home, someone with experience handling traumatized animals, professional trainers, something we clearly don't have. He just needs more time." "How much time?" Mark's voice cracked. "He doesn't eat. He doesn't play. He shakes every time we walk past him. And Liam?" He glanced at their son, who had retreated halfway up the stairs, watching them with wide, worried eyes. "Liam is scared to move in his own house. Is this what we wanted for our family?"
Sarah had no answer. The shelter volunteers had explained that Teddy came from a severe neglect case. They'd found him in a flooded basement, abandoned for days without food or water. He'd been so thin, his ribs showed through his matted fur. They'd promised that with patience and unconditional love, he would heal. They'd sworn he would blossom. But time was crushing them all under its weight. That night, Teddy's whining wouldn't stop. The high-pitched, desperate sound scraped against Sarah's last remaining nerve like nails on a chalkboard. At 2 in the morning, she found Mark in the kitchen, staring at his phone with the animal shelter's number already pulled up on the screen. "I'll call them tomorrow morning," he said quietly, unable to meet her eyes. "It's not fair to any of us, especially not to Teddy. He deserves better than this." Sarah wanted to argue, to fight, to insist they keep trying. Instead, she simply nodded, too exhausted to form words. "Is Teddy leaving?" Liam's small voice from the doorway pierced straight through Sarah's heart. Their son stood there, clutching his stuffed elephant, his eyes already filling with tears. "We're talking about what's best for everyone, sweetheart," Sarah managed to say. "But I love him." Liam's voice was so small, so heartbreakingly sincere. "He just needs a friend. He's lonely." "Sometimes love isn't enough, buddy," Mark said, and Sarah heard the defeat in every syllable. The next morning arrived with a tension that felt like waiting for inevitable thunder. Teddy had moved from behind the couch to beneath the dining room table, still curled into the tightest ball possible, still shaking at every sound. His breakfast sat untouched. Mark had already made the call. Someone from the shelter would arrive that afternoon to take Teddy back. "One more day," Sarah whispered, crouching near the table but not too close. "We gave you one more day, sweet boy." Teddy's eyes watched her, and Sarah could swear she saw understanding there, or maybe resignation. Liam spent the morning sitting cross-legged on the floor near the table, not approaching, not reaching out, just being present. Sarah noticed him whispering to the puppy, though she couldn't make out the words. The boy's small hand rested palm up on the floor between them, an offering of gentleness, of peace. But Teddy remained frozen, trapped in his fear. The afternoon arrived too quickly. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing lunch, trying not to cry, when she heard Mark in the garage. He was organizing his scattered tools with almost violent energy, attacking the mess he'd been putting off for weeks, anything to avoid watching the shelter van pull up to take Teddy away. Then came the crash. Metal striking concrete, the sharp clang of a wrench hitting the floor. Sarah's head snapped up. Through the window, she saw Mark curse and bend to retrieve fallen tools. The garage door stood wide open behind him. "Teddy!" Liam's shriek cut through the house like a blade. Sarah dropped the knife she was holding and ran. Her son was racing toward the back door, his small legs pumping with desperate speed. Through the window, she caught a flash of golden fur disappearing through the open garage door. "Liam, no!" Sarah grabbed for him, but he was already outside, running. Stay back, the tools.
The garage was a minefield. Exposed nails scattered across the workbench. Loose boards with protruding screws. An open box cutter left carelessly near the edge. The lawnmower blades section disassembled on the floor, its edges gleaming wickedly in the afternoon light. And somewhere in that chaos of danger, a terrified puppy. Mark emerged from behind his truck, his face chalk white. "Where is he?" "There," Liam pointed to the far corner. Teddy had wedged himself behind a stack of paint cans near the workbench, surrounded by sharp edges and exposed metal. His entire body shook so violently it looked like convulsions. "Liam, get back in the house right now," Sarah commanded, her voice harsh with terror. All she could see was her toddler and the puppy, both panicking. Sharp objects everywhere, blood and emergency rooms, and newspaper headlines about tragic accidents. "Don't move suddenly," Mark warned, edging forward with his hands extended carefully. "If he bolts—" But Teddy was already trembling harder, his eyes rolling white with pure terror. One paw lifted, ready to run, and directly in his path was the disassembled mower blade. "Everybody stop," Sarah hissed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. "Nobody move." This was it. This was the moment that proved they weren't ready for a traumatized animal. Someone was going to get hurt. This was going to end in disaster. Then Liam started walking forward. "Liam, I said stop." Sarah lurched toward him, but Mark's hand shot out, stopping her. "Wait," he breathed, something in his voice making her freeze. Their 3-year-old son moved with a strange, certain calm that seemed impossible for someone his age. Not rushed, not grabbing, not forcing. He simply walked forward with his small hands visible, empty, non-threatening. Each step deliberate and gentle. Teddy's trembling intensified, his haunches bunched to flee. "Liam, please," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Come back." But Liam didn't stop. He reached the corner where the puppy had pressed himself against the wall, surrounded by danger, trapped by his own terror. The boy slowly, carefully, lowered himself to his knees on the cold concrete floor. For a moment, nobody breathed. The world seemed to stop spinning. Then, Liam did something that would replay in Sarah's mind for the rest of her life, that would define her understanding of compassion and healing forever. He leaned forward and gently, deliberately, pressed his forehead against Teddy's trembling head. The garage went absolutely silent. "Don't be scared," Liam whispered, his small voice carrying in the stillness. "I'm here. I'm right here with you." The shaking stopped. Sarah watched, frozen in disbelief, as Teddy's body transformed from rigid terror to something softer. The puppy's wild, panicked eyes fixed on Liam's face, mere inches away. His breathing slowed. The violent trembling that had defined every moment of his existence in their home simply ceased. Then Teddy's tail moved, just once, a tiny, tentative wag. "Oh my God," Mark breathed beside her, his voice thick with emotion. Liam stayed perfectly still, his forehead still touching the puppy's, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. "See?" the boy whispered. "Nothing scary here, just me, just your friend." And then Teddy did something impossible, something miraculous. He pressed forward, closing the microscopic distance between them, and his small pink tongue darted out to lick Liam's cheek. Liam giggled. The sound was pure and bright and full of such uncomplicated joy that Sarah felt something break open in her chest. Every wall she'd built around her exhaustion and fear crumbling in an instant. "Good boy, Teddy," Liam murmured,
his small hand now moving to gently stroke the golden fur. "You're such a good, brave boy." The puppy's tail wagged again, then again, his body unwound from its defensive curl. Those frightened brown eyes that had avoided every gaze for 2 weeks now locked onto Liam's face with something that looked like trust, like recognition, like finally coming home after a long, terrifying journey. "Can you believe this?" Mark's voice cracked. He fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. The security camera, it would have caught everything. Sarah couldn't speak. She watched her 3-year-old son sit back on his heels, and Teddy, terrified, traumatized, broken Teddy, crawled forward to rest his head on Liam's lap. The puppy's tail wagged steadily now, his entire body relaxed in a way they'd never witnessed. "You were just scared," Liam said softly, both small hands now cupping the puppy's face with infinite gentleness. "But I'm not scary. We're friends now. Best friends." Teddy's response was to burrow closer, pressing against the toddler's small frame, as if trying to merge with him, to become one being. The trust was absolute, instant, undeniable. That evening, after carefully extracting both boy and puppy from the garage and watching in stunned amazement as Teddy actually ate his dinner, wolfing it down enthusiastically right next to Liam, their sides touching, Mark pulled up the security footage on his laptop. Sarah stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other holding Liam on her hip. Teddy's head rested on the boy's dangling feet. The puppy hadn't left Liam's side since the garage, not even for a single moment. The footage played. They watched Teddy bolt into the garage, saw themselves react with panic and fear, watched Liam walk forward with that impossible, inexplicable calm. Then the moment, the forehead press. Liam's whispered words picked up clearly by the camera's audio. "Don't be scared. I'm here. I'm right here with you." And Teddy, transforming, the shaking stopping, the tail beginning to wag, the lick, the trust blooming, visible and complete and perfect. Mark's hands shook as he paused the video. On screen, frozen in time, a 3-year-old boy and a broken puppy pressed together in perfect understanding. Two souls recognizing each other across the vast gulf of trauma and innocence. "If there wasn't a camera," Sarah whispered, "I wouldn't have believed it." "I'm watching it, and I still don't believe it," Mark's voice cracked. He turned to look at Liam, who was smiling down at Teddy with such simple, pure affection. "Buddy, how did you know what to do?" Liam shrugged, the gesture so casual it was almost funny. "I just knew he needed not to be alone anymore. Like me when I have bad dreams and you come sit with me." The next morning, Sarah called the shelter back, not to return Teddy, but to tell them what had happened, to share the miracle they'd witnessed. "It's actually not uncommon," the volunteer named Rachel explained, her voice warm with understanding and experience. "Dogs, especially severely traumatized ones, sometimes respond to children very differently than they do to adults. Kids don't carry the same expectations, anxieties, or demands. They just exist purely in the moment, without agenda." "But it was instant," Sarah protested, watching through the kitchen window as Liam and Teddy played together in the backyard for the first time. "The puppy was actually playing, running, jumping, his tail a constant metronome of happiness. 2 weeks of absolute terror, and then in one moment?" "Children can be incredibly intuitive," Rachel continued gently. "Your son approached without fear, without trying to force anything or fix anything. He simply offered presence without pressure, connection without conditions. For a dog who's experienced severe trauma from adult humans, neglect, abandonment,
possibly abuse. That innocent, non-threatening energy can be exactly what breaks through the walls they've built. Mark leaned against the kitchen counter, still replaying the footage on his phone for what must have been the 20th time. We were so focused on giving him space, following all the expert advice, that we were actually reinforcing his isolation, making him feel more alone. "You were doing exactly what you thought was right," Rachel assured them kindly. "Everything the experts recommended. But sometimes healing doesn't follow the rules or timelines we expect. Sometimes it takes a 3-year-old's wisdom to show us that love isn't about proper technique or perfect strategy. It's about genuine, authentic connection, heart to heart." If it hadn't been for Liam, Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. If they'd sent Teddy back that afternoon, if they'd given up just one day too soon, just hours before the breakthrough. "But it was for Liam," Rachel said gently. "And now you have exactly the family you were always meant to be." From that day forward, Liam and Teddy became truly inseparable. They napped together every afternoon, ate side by side at every meal, played until both collapsed in exhausted happy heaps. The puppy followed the toddler everywhere, his eternal shadow and guardian. And Liam spoke to him constantly, filling the air with chatter and affection and the simple certainty that they belonged to each other. The transformation was so complete, so total, that sometimes Sarah had to watch the security footage again just to remind herself that the fearful, trembling creature from 2 weeks ago had actually existed, that his pain had been real, that their desperation had been justified. It had just taken a 3-year-old's pure heart to show them all that healing doesn't always look the way we think it should. Sometimes the line between despair and hope, between failure and success, is guarded not by expertise or strategy, but by the uncomplicated wisdom of a child who hasn't yet learned that some things are supposed to be impossible. In the end, the Mitchells didn't save Teddy, and Teddy didn't save Liam. They saved each other, the way all real love works. Two small beings, both uncertain of their place in the world, finding it in each other through a simple gesture of connection that asked for nothing except, "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." What the camera captured that day wasn't just a moment. It was a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest healing happens when we stop trying to control it, when we set aside our adult logic and expertise and plans, and simply allow another heart, especially a small, pure one, to lead the way. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that love speaks through actions more powerful than words, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that restore your faith in humanity. Share it with friends and family who need to remember that sometimes the smallest souls carry the greatest power to teach us how to love without fear. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story that reminds us what truly matters in life.